Hi again, everybody. So, having looked at conflict in the last video, I just wanted to do another relatively short one looking at the sorts of themes that are explored in the play. Now, this one's particularly relevant again for the final question when it comes to the exam. But you need to make sure that you're able to not just sort of give a basic summary of what a key theme might be, but if it comes up in the question, you're going to have to actually be able to talk about how it comes up in the play. So find a couple of examples in the play where you can sort of point to it and say, see that conversation happen in there. Well, that's relevant to this particular theme because now this is why I was saying right from the start, you really need to have notes on these themes, which include either quotations or references from various parts of the play. For anything like this, you want to make sure you've always got 3 or 4 references or quotes from across the play, because you might need as many as 3, for example, in the exam, and if that's the theme that comes up, you'll definitely want that information. So there are a few issues with themes because sometimes, there's quite a big overlap between theme and conflict. A lot of the time is the thing. So some of the things that would be themes you'll have notes on as conflicts. It's you deal with it as the same kind of thing. The other thing is there's quite a bit of overlap often between themes, but that's an important part of literature, and there should be overlap between themes. And that regardless of whether you're reading a novel or watching a film or something like that, things like themes, the key ideas that run through a text don't sit in isolation from everything else. They're developed gradually, so it makes sense they would have connections to each other as well quite a lot of the time. Some of the key themes that you find in Bold Girls are that aren't rooted just in the conflicts. One of them is this thing about deception or self-deception, which is quite closely linked to this thing about the truth, which might be asked about as well. The theme of, I've seen before things like the theme of the truth, and it's not a great way to phrase it, but what they mean is the theme of the impact of the truth or the damage it can do, the way in which the truth can be used as a weapon, that kind of stuff. And that does then start to tie into things like deception and self-deception, how people lie to themselves or how people lie to others, and how the truth then forces that to end or forces that to fall apart. Nora deceives herself. Nora's issue is self-deception. This idea that with just the right fabric and just the right approach, the house will look perfect, and the implication seems to be that, and then everything will be fine and I'll be happy. There's deception as well. You have Cassie and Marie, for example. Deirdre, certainly for a long part of the play, for most of the time that we know her, isn't fully honest, and that she isn't fully forthcoming about the situation. So there's quite a lot of deception there, but in most cases what you find is that of these, when the truth comes out, that it sort of tears something apart. That's why it's quite interesting that the truth is symbolized as a knife, something sharp and dangerous, and that can cut deep and do damage. Because, for example, the conflict between Cassie and Marie, it's not as if it resolves or anything like that. It's just that the truth that comes out, that brings their conflict out, which destroys this deception that Cassie has been maintaining, ends up fundamentally changing their lives, probably destroying their relationship, you would have thought. So there's quite a few examples of that particular theme, people deceiving themselves or deceiving others. And then quite often, depending on the question, but quite often that also then runs into how those deceptions or self-deceptions fall apart. Marie is clearly guilty of self-deception. This idea of building up this idealized vision of who her husband was, and then she's eventually given no option but to allow the truth, but to destroy that. She does admit she'd known in the past, but when Deirdre's right there physically in front of her holding this knife, she can't deceive herself anymore. So she takes the knife, takes the truth, and destroys that self-deception. Another one that you have, and again, there's a bit of overlap. This idea of dreams versus reality, what people want to happen or what they hope to happen, and what's actually going to happen. Nora has this dream of making life perfect by redecorating, and it's not true. The reality is a world away. Cassie has this dream about leaving, which she's never going to do. We know she's never going to do. We've got that bit where Marie says near the end about how she's going to give her the money back once Deirdre's returned it. And she says, Cassie will get it back because she needs it for dreaming. It's all she'll do with it. So she's not going anywhere. This dream of and it's not even just a dream of leaving Belfast. Cassie's dream is to escape. is to escape not Belfast, but to escape her life, to escape her unhappiness. The implication, therefore, is that the reality is that she can't, that she's trapped. Another interesting theme is this idea of the role of or the burdens placed on women. It's interesting to note in the play there are no male characters except those that are referenced externally. Now, male characters drive everything. You know, the behaviour, the actions of Michael, for example, drive this play. In terms of where Marie is, but also the very existence of Deirdre. The conflict between Nora and Cassie, a lot of it is rooted in their competing views of Cassie's dad, Nora's husband. So the men are absent, but very, very present. You know, it's still quite dominant. And I think one of the things that we see in Bold Girls is the way in which men, or one of the ways you could look at it, men doing the destroying, doing the fighting, but whenever things go wrong and when the consequences for that inevitably appear, women are the ones who face the greatest burden. You see it in this play. You see women holding a society together, not men, not the ones who get, you know, lionized and the ones who get sort of seen as martyrs and stuff like that. You know, they're not the ones holding society together. They're not the ones protecting the kids, etc. It's women that are doing that. And you see through the course of the play, I suppose, different ways in which that manifests as well. The way in which the women in this play having different ways have these kind of burdens put on them, and whether that is Marie, who seems to have maintained this idealized view of her husband, at least in large part to protect her children, that building a nest idea. You have the thing with Cassie and Nora, this suggestion that of just in Nora's case just having to accept an abusive, violent relationship. In Cassie's case, when her mother feels that well, if that's not happening, you should just be happy, even if you're not happy. Look at Deirdre. There are suggestions made about the sorts of things that happen to Deirdre in the sort of life that she's got. There's a bit she talks about guys trying to get her to go in a car as well, things like that. So different ways in which the burden placed on women or the role of women is explored, especially certainly from Marie is the main one, but not the only one. This idea of the role of protecting others, holding society together. It's this thing about selflessness, putting other people first, which is what you see most clearly through Marie, and it's the thing that explains Marie's long-term behaviour, I suppose, most effectively. Not an exhaustive list, there are other things that could come up, but to give you an idea of the sorts of avenues you might want to go down for each theme, and remember what I was saying, any of these that you want to be able to explain, you want references from key parts through the text that you'd be able to use to say, this is how I know this is the case, and that can be useful for the final question. And in our next video, we will have a look at how that exam paper actually works.